The storm didn't warn her. It simply broke. Rain lashed at the gnarled trees, cold and relentless, turning the forest into a blur of silver and shadow. Each gust cut at Ashlyn Vera's face, biting and sharp, dragging tears from eyes that were already brimming with pain. Her body ached in ways that went beyond bruises and cuts, aches that burrowed into her chest and burned along her spine. Yet she ran. She had no choice but to run, though each step threatened to betray her weakness. The forest was a maze of frost-coated branches and slick mud that clung to her boots, pulling at her like the weight of the world itself. Fog curled through the trees like ghostly fingers, brushing against her skin, slithering over her shoulders, and whispering doubts into her mind. She shivered, not just from the cold, but from the raw fear that clutched her heart. The howl came again, long, low, and haunting, echoing through the misty valleys of the forest. She recognized it immediately. Her mother-in-law's pack. The ones who had never seen her as more than a servant, a shadow, a mistake. Ashlyn stumbled over a root, almost collapsing, but she forced herself upright. Blood ran down the side of her face, streaking her pale skin in jagged red lines that mirrored the anger burning in her chest. That fury, that wild, uncontrollable spark that she had spent years hiding, it flared now, whispering through her veins like molten silver. Her body trembled as the energy surged, a silver flame coiling beneath her skin, ready to explode. She had always known she was dangerous. That knowledge had always been a curse. And now, as the night twisted around her, she realized just how little control she had over the thing that could save her, or destroy her. She slowed, pressed herself against a tree trunk, and pressed her palm to the bark, listening. Every crackle of leaves, every snapping twig, made her heart leap violently against her ribs. She could hear them moving through the forest, the pack, merciless and relentless, hunting her like an animal. And yet, somewhere deep beneath the terror, beneath the racing of her pulse, a stubborn ember of defiance glowed. They had treated her like a maid. They had demeaned her, belittled her, used her as nothing more than a tool. But she wasn't a tool. Not anymore. Not tonight. Her thoughts swirled as wildly as the wind around her. Why does everyone see only the servant in me, and not the fire burning beneath? The words were a whisper at first, almost lost to the storm, but as the anger rose, as the cold bit harder, they became a roar inside her head. She had been invisible all her life. Forgotten. Used. Punished for daring to breathe too loudly, to lift her eyes too proudly. But even now, in the darkest hour, she refused to disappear. A distant crack, branches snapping under heavy paws, pulled her gaze upward. Shadows danced between the silver shafts of lightning. She could see them, the shapes moving, hunched and predatory, eyes glinting in the dark. Fear tried to root her to the spot, tried to paralyze her with memory and pain, but she shook it off. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to run. And she ran, stumbling through mud, her breath ragged, her chest heaving with the effort. The forest was no longer just a forest. It was a battlefield, a trap, a mirror of the chaos in her own heart. Every step she took threatened to tear her apart from the inside. And still, the silver flame pulsed. Weak, flickering, uncertain, but alive. She could feel it in her hands, in her feet, in the subtle tremor that ran through her hair when the wind caught it. It was her own heartbeat made visible, a promise of power she had never allowed herself to embrace. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. She ducked under a low-hanging branch, her fingers scraping against rough bark, leaving tiny scratches that stung in the cold. Rain poured down her back, chilling her through layers of damp clothing, but she barely noticed. Her focus narrowed to survival, the sound of movement, the scent of pursuers, the pulse of power beneath her skin. And in the storm, she was not just a frightened girl running for her life. She was fire. She was silver flame. She was something the world had never seen coming. But she was also human, vulnerable, exhausted. Her legs shook from fatigue, her lungs burned, and each heartbeat reminded her how close she was to collapsing. Her mother-in-law's voice echoed in her mind, sharp and cruel, a dagger dipped in ice. "You are nothing. You are less than nothing. You will always serve, never rise." Ashlyn's hands curled into fists at her sides, nails biting into her palms as she whispered to herself, "No, I am more than you. I am everything you could never be." Lightning flashed, illuminating the forest in jagged white. For a moment, she saw them, her hunters. They moved with precision, their snarls cutting through the wind. She felt their eyes on her, smelled their predatory hunger, and in that instant, the silver flame surged, licking her skin with warmth that contradicted the chill around her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to fight. She wanted to vanish entirely, to become something untouchable, something that could not be chained by fear or cruelty. The wind howled, carrying the scent of rain and iron and fear. Every tree seemed to lean toward her. Every shadow seemed alive, pressing closer. Ashlyn ran harder, driven by a mix of instinct, desperation, and the barely controlled power that quivered beneath her skin. Each heartbeat felt like a drum, pounding the rhythm of survival, pounding the rhythm of rebellion. And then, just when exhaustion threatened to pull her to her knees, she stumbled into a small clearing. The rain poured down, soaking her completely. Mud clung to her skin, her hair plastered across her face. And she froze, not because she was safe, but because something in the clearing was wrong. The shadows seemed deeper here, darker. Silence pressed down on her like a suffocating blanket. Even the storm seemed to hesitate. Her chest heaved. She wanted to call out, to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. She listened instead, listened for the slightest movement, the faintest shift in the air. And then she heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible rustle from the edge of the clearing. Her pulse jumped. Her fingers tingled with the anticipation of power, the promise of a shift she had not yet mastered. Her body responded before her mind could catch up, muscles coiling, senses sharpening. The howl came again, closer this time, a low, menacing sound that vibrated through the trees. Her mother-in-law's pack was closing in, relentless, determined. And yet, in the eye of the storm, Ashlyn felt something else, something that had nothing to do with fear. Hope. A flicker of it. A spark that whispered, "You are not alone. You are meant for more." And right then, in that drenched, chaotic clearing, as rain mixed with blood and mud, her silver flame pulsed violently. Her heart pounded with the rhythm of survival, but also with the rhythm of awakening. She was not a servant. She was not a shadow. She was fire, she was light, she was power, and someone was coming for her. Her voice trembled as she spoke aloud, more to herself than anyone else. "If anyone dares to stop me, they will learn that I am no one's pawn." And as the words left her lips, the forest seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging that the game had changed. She was no longer just fleeing. She was about to take her first step into a destiny that would shatter the world around her. If her struggle cuts into your soul, if her fight makes your heart ache, subscribe to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections now and never miss a moment of her story. And if you won't subscribe, comment below the country you're watching from and tell us why you're turning your back on a fire that refuses to be tamed. Ashlyn's boots sank into the mud with every step, a wet, sucking sound that seemed to echo through the trees. Each lunge forward was an effort against gravity, against exhaustion, against the storm that sought to steal her breath. The rain fell in sheets, so heavy it felt like needles striking her skin. Her hair clung to her face, plastering strands over her blood-streaked cheeks. Yet, despite the cold and the fatigue, she pressed onward. Somewhere beneath the tempest and fear, a stubborn spark refused to be snuffed out, a spark that was more than just survival. It was defiance. Her muscles ached in ways that made her legs feel like lead. Her lungs burned, rasping for oxygen, and still, she dared not pause. Not for a second. Not while the howls echoed ever closer, a relentless rhythm of pursuit. Her mother-in-law's pack was skilled, merciless, and vicious, trained to see her as a servant, a nobody, a girl whose fire had to be tamed or extinguished. And yet, she wasn't the same girl anymore. She would not kneel, would not grovel, would not allow the world to define her worth. The fog thickened, curling around tree trunks like ghostly serpents, hiding the forest's edges and creating illusions of movement. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground, twisting and bending, merging with her fear. She forced herself to focus on the ground beneath her, on the tactile reality of mud and roots and slippery stones. But the forest had its own heartbeat tonight, one that pulsed in tandem with her fear, and she felt it in her chest as surely as she felt the silver flame threading its way beneath her skin. It was alive, wild, impatient. Each step she took carried her closer to some unknown destination, though she did not know what awaited her. She only knew she had to keep moving. She had to survive. And yet, in moments of fleeting clarity, she wondered, why had life been so cruel? Why had the world conspired to make her invisible, to make her powerless, to punish her for the very essence of who she was? The questions burned in her mind, igniting a fury that mingled with the silver flame inside her. A branch snapped behind her. Ashlyn froze mid-step, her chest tight, eyes scanning the darkness. The shadow moved slightly, deliberately. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but another part, a deeper, sharper part of her, told her to stay. Not because she wanted to fight, not yet, but because she had learned, painfully, that survival was not just about fleeing. It was about knowing when to hold your ground. She pressed her back against the rough bark of a massive oak, the water running down her shoulders cold enough to make her shiver, and listened. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, loud enough to drown out the storm. And then she heard it again. The low, guttural growl, closer this time, a sound that rattled her bones and reminded her how small she was in the face of those who wanted to control her. But she refused to tremble. She refused to beg. She had always been the girl who took what life gave her and turned it into a weapon, quietly, invisibly. And now, the weapon was awake. Her fingers twitched involuntarily. She could feel it, the silver flames stirring beneath her skin, coiling like a living thing, hungry and impatient. She could almost hear its whisper, faint and urgent. "You are more than you know, claim it." The power was not something she had yet mastered. It was something she feared as much as she desired. But for the first time, in the midst of blood, mud, and storm, she allowed herself a small, defiant thought. Maybe she didn't have to fear it anymore. A sudden gust of wind blew through the clearing, carrying with it the sharp tang of wet earth and iron, the scent of fear, the scent of her pursuers. She ducked instinctively, slipping over a slick root, landing hard on her knees. Mud coated her hands, and pain shot up her arms, but she ignored it. Each second counted. Every breath she wasted could be her last. She forced herself to rise again, her body shaking from effort and cold, her mind racing with fragments of memory she could not shake. The cruel words of her mother-in-law, sharp as knives, cut through her thoughts. "You are nothing. You belong to us. You will never rise above your station." The echoes of that voice fueled a fire within her that no storm could douse. Lightning split the sky overhead, illuminating the forest in stark, blinding white. For a heartbeat, she could see clearly. The shadows of the trees stretched like dark claws, reaching for her. And then, in that sudden flash, she saw movement, a figure. Not her pursuers, not the pack, but something else. Something that seemed larger, more powerful, more dangerous. And yet, somehow safe. Her pulse quickened. She didn't know if it was hope or fear, but the presence was undeniable. It was magnetic, pulling at her attention even as her instincts screamed at her to run. She wanted to turn, to flee deeper into the forest, but curiosity, reckless and unbidden, rooted her to the spot. The silver flame pulsed again, responding to something in the air, a resonance she could not name. The wind carried a sound through the trees, a low, commanding growl, resonating with the core of her being. Her body reacted before her mind could, muscles coiling, senses sharpening. She could smell the power in the air, a blend of wolf and human, dominance and restraint. Her pulse spiked, a mixture of awe and dread curling in her stomach. Whoever or whatever was out there, they were no ordinary hunter. Rain stung her eyes as she moved forward cautiously, each step careful, measured, silent against the mud and fallen leaves. The forest seemed to shift around her, opening in pockets, hiding threats and wonders in equal measure. She felt her powers responding subtly, flickers of silver light tracing along her skin in moments too quick for her to control. It was as though the forest itself recognized the awakening within her, acknowledging the fire that had been smoldering in secret for far too long. She stopped at the edge of a stream, water rushing over stones, turbulent and unforgiving, much like her own emotions. Kneeling, she pressed her fingers into the icy water, letting the shock of it pulse through her veins, sharpening her awareness. The reflection in the water startled her, blood-matted hair, pale skin streaked with dirt and bruises, eyes wide and luminous with raw intensity. This was no longer the timid, obedient girl who had been treated like a servant. This was someone entirely new, someone who had begun to claim the power she had been denied. A rustling behind her made her spin, silver flame flaring subtly along her forearms. The pack was near. She could smell them now, their sweat and fury and hunger mingling in the damp night air. But she could also smell it, something different, something commanding, something that dwarfed the human threats closing in. Her body tensed instinctively, instincts honed over years of hiding, running, surviving. She was ready to fight, but against what? Against whom? Her heart pounded. She could feel every beat in her chest, a thunderous echo that matched the storm. The rain washed her wounds, stinging painfully, but somehow it was cleansing, burning away the remnants of the girl she had been, leaving only the fire that refused to be caged. She whispered to herself, barely audible over the storm. I am not theirs. I am not the world's. Iamine. And then, in the midst of the downpour, a shadow moved with impossible grace between the trees. Her pulse quickened. The presence was close now, radiating authority and power that made her knees weak and her senses sharpened to a razor's edge. She could feel it in her bones, in the rhythm of her own pulse. Someone had come for her. Someone strong. Someone dangerous. Someone who might see her not as a servant, not as a mistake, but as fire, real, untamed, unstoppable fire. Ashlyn's breath caught in her throat as she took a cautious step forward, mud sucking at her boots. Lightning flared again, and in that brief illumination, she glimpsed a figure, tall, broad, commanding, eyes like molten silver that seemed to pierce straight through the fog, through her fear, through the storm itself. A shiver of recognition ran down her spine. She didn't know his name. She didn't know why he was here. But she knew. Somehow, she knew that her life, the girl she had been, the fire she had hidden, the fear she had carried, was about to change forever. The forest held its breath with her, every leaf and branch suspended in anticipation. Ashlyn's gaze locked on the figure, and for the first time since the hunt began, she felt a flicker of hope mingled with fear, burning in her chest. She could not control it, could not name it, but she felt it. Something big was coming, something dangerous, something that could either save her or destroy her. And as the storm raged around her, as the forest seemed to close in and the pack drew nearer, she whispered aloud, trembling, soaked, wounded, yet defiant. If anyone thinks they can control me, they are about to learn. I am fire. I am storm. I am more than they ever imagined. If her struggle cuts into your soul, if her fight makes your heart ache, subscribe to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections now, and never miss a moment of her story. And if you won't subscribe, comment below the country you're watching from, and tell us why you're turning your back on a fire that refuses to be tamed. The storm did not relent, but neither did she. Ashlyn Vera's pulse thundered in her chest as she stumbled through the forest, her eyes darting between shadows that seemed to stretch like claws toward her. She did not notice the way her breath came in ragged gasps, the way her legs burned from the effort of running, or the way the cold rain seemed to seep into her bones. She only knew that the presence was close. Something larger, darker, more commanding than the pack that hunted her pressed against the edges of her awareness, and it made her skin prickle, made her pulse spike, made her silver flame stir in anticipation and fear. And then, as if drawn by the storm itself, he appeared. Kalen Draxer, the Alpha King. The forest seemed to bend around him, shadows stretching and curling in acknowledgement of his presence. He stepped from the darkness with an ease that made the trees shiver, his frame tall and unyielding, broad shoulders wrapped in dark, rain-slicked clothing that clung to him like armor. His eyes, molten silver, unrelenting, piercing straight through the fog, through the rain, through her fear, found her. Ashlyn froze, every nerve screaming. Her chest heaved with breath, her body trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline, but she could not tear her gaze away. There was something in the way he moved, deliberate, controlled, like a predator who had never known doubt. He had been watching her. She knew it before he spoke, before the tension in the air solidified into something electric. Her body hummed with awareness, every instinct screaming that he was not here to harm her, yet every part of her remained uncertain. Kalen's voice cut through the storm, low and compelling, the kind of voice that made the air itself vibrate. "You're stronger than they'll ever allow. And I intend to show you." The words were not a threat, but a promise. And as they fell across her senses, Ashlyn felt something stir deep in her chest, a flicker of hope tangled with the thrum of her fear. The storm seemed to respond to him. Rain streaked across his broad features, hair plastered to his forehead, yet he moved as if untouched by the chaos around him. The forest no longer felt like a trap. Instead, it felt like a stag. The distance shrinking in a heartbeat, and her body reacted before her mind could process. Her fingers twitched, her pulse raced, and the silver flame beneath her skin shivered in recognition of his power, of the danger, of the unspoken connection that seemed to pull them together despite the storm. He extended a hand toward her, not in demand, not in command, but as an anchor. "Trust me," he said, the words barely audible over the roar of the wind, yet they resonated in a way that bypassed fear entirely. And though every part of her screamed to pull back, to run, to hide, she felt the weight of something else. Curiosity, necessity, instinct. She took it. Her fingers brushed his. Sparks leapt in that instant, not electrical, not literal, but the kind of spark that sent shivers racing down the spine, the kind that makes a heart hammer against ribs and a mind catch fire in a single heartbeat. Kalen's touch was firm, grounding, protective. The storm licked around them, but in that bubble of tension, that narrowing of focus, nothing else existed. She was bloodied, muddy, soaked to the bone, trembling, and yet in his presence, she felt seen. Not as a servant, not as a shadow, not as a mistake. Seen. Fully. His gaze lingered, sharp and assessing, and she felt herself shrinking under it even as she wanted to lean into it. It was complicated, confusing, dangerous, but intoxicating. Every muscle in her body responded to him. Every nerve thrummed in awareness. Every heartbeat seemed synchronized with the rhythm of the rain, the pulse of the forest, the stirrings of her own silver flame. Kalen's other hand moved instinctively, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face, fingers brushing her temple in a gesture that was startlingly intimate, startlingly tender, and yet filled with authority. "You do not belong to them," he said, low and resonant, "but you will learn what it is to belong somewhere. Somewhere real, somewhere powerful." His words were a tether, drawing her out of the storm of fear that had been her constant companion for years. And though she wanted to doubt him, the flicker of hope grew. The silver flame pulsed stronger, responding to the presence of his power, the certainty in his tone. It was as though the storm itself acknowledged him, bending and swirling around them in a protective circle. Rain hammered down, soaking them both, but the moment stretched, almost timeless, suspended between danger and desire, fear and attraction. Her body reacted in ways she had never experienced. Her pulse raced, her stomach clenched with tension, her muscles coiled, ready for flight or fight, yet she felt something else beneath it, a magnetic pull she could not deny. Kaelin Draxer had arrived at a moment when everything within her had been unsteady, when every instinct had screamed that she was alone. And yet here he was. Not to save her in the traditional sense, not as some flawless hero descending from the skies, but as a force that could match her, a presence that could channel the fire she had spent her life fearing. He stepped closer, protective, shielding her from the wind and the rain, his broad form a barrier between her and the chaos. Their hands brushed again, a fleeting contact that was enough to send a jolt through her spine, enough to make her pulse stutter and her silver flame pulse in response. She felt exposed and exhilarated all at once. She wanted to recoil, to scream, to deny this pull, but she could not. There was a power in him that commanded acknowledgement, demanded recognition, and awakened something deep within her that she had not dared to embrace before. Every instinct in her told her to run, yet every part of her wanted to stay. Her silver flame pulsed brighter, whispering secrets she could not yet understand. You are not meant to hide. You are not meant to cower. You are meant to claim. And when he whispered again, low, deliberate, commanding, I've been watching you. I see your fire. I will not let them take it from you. Something inside her shifted. Fear, for the first time, was not the dominant emotion. The storm, the forest, the darkness, it all seemed to fade around them. Rain splashed in torrents, lightning cracked the sky above, but none of it mattered. Only him. Only the silver gleam of his eyes, the weight of his presence, the promise he carried like a tangible force in the air. She wanted to step back, wanted to question, wanted to fight the pull, but her body betrayed her. Every nerve hummed, every muscle tensed, and she felt alive in a way she had not since she had discovered her silver flame. He leaned just slightly, closing the space between them, his breath mingling with the storm, carrying a heat that contrasted with the cold rain. You are stronger than you know, he murmured, voice low and intimate, and stronger than they will ever allow. I will show you what that means. The words wrapped around her like a cloak, both dangerous and comforting. She felt herself trembling, not from the cold, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer intensity of the moment, from the weight of the connection she could neither understand nor resist. The forest around them seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of twigs, every distant howl of the pack seemed to underscore the tension, the unspoken promise, the dangerous intimacy of the encounter. And in that space, fraught with danger and charged with attraction, she realized that her life, her fear, her silver flame, everything, had led to this moment. Ashlin's hands brushed against his once more, accidental, fleeting, yet deliberate in the way the universe seemed to conspire to hold them together. Sparks of awareness, of desire, of something primal, flared between them, unspoken but undeniable. The storm raged around them, a mirror of the storm in her chest, but for the first time, she felt the possibility of calm. Not safety, not relief, but connection. He shifted subtly, his presence radiating authority and assurance. You are not alone anymore, Kaelin said, voice low, carrying over the storm. I will not let them dictate who you are. Not anymore. Not to me. And in that moment, she felt the weight of isolation and fear lift just slightly. Not entirely, she was not naive, but enough to allow the spark of trust to kindle within her heart. Lightning cracked again, illuminating his face, sharp jawline, storm-dark hair plastered his forehead, eyes that held both danger and protection. She wanted to recoil, wanted to resist, but she could not. Something primal, something deeply instinctive, tethered her to him. She could feel it in the hum of her silver flame, in the tremor of her pulse, in the magnetic pull that drew her closer even as her mind screamed to remain wary. Do you dare witness the alpha claim what's rightfully his? Subscribe now to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections, or live forever wondering what could have been. And if you won't subscribe, comment below the country you're watching from and tell us why you'd turn your back on fire this powerful. Ashlyn's pulse thundered in her chest as she stood in the clearing, rain plastering her hair to her blood-streaked face. The forest, still alive with the storm's fury, seemed to recede around Kalen Draxer's presence. Each lightning flash cut through the mist, illuminating his broad, commanding form like some elemental force sprung from legend itself. His eyes, molten silver, impossible to look away from, locked onto her, piercing through the exhaustion, the fear, and the defiance she carried like armor. Her body reacted before her mind could, every nerve humming in recognition of the raw power he radiated. He moved with intention, each step measured yet fluid, like a predator who knew exactly when to strike or protect. And in that movement, in that silent command of the forest around them, Ashlyn felt something stir deep within her chest. She was not sure if it was fear or fascination, desire or recognition, but the spark was undeniable. Kalen extended a hand, and though the storm roared around them, the gesture seemed to cut through the chaos. "Trust me," he said, voice low, almost hesitant, but threaded with authority. Ashlyn's hand trembled as she reached toward him. The moment their fingers brushed, a current ran between them, sharp and electric, sending shivers down her spine. It was not warmth nor cold, exactly, but something deeper, something that made her pulse skip and her breath catch. She had spent her life hiding, bending to the will of others, enduring cruelty, humiliation, and invisibility. And yet, in the presence of this man, this Alpha King, she felt visible, understood, recognized. Not as a servant, not as an object, not as someone to be controlled, but as fire, as silver flame incarnate, as something too dangerous and precious to be ignored. Kalen did not speak immediately, letting the silence stretch between them, thick and heavy with rain, electricity, and unspoken tension. His gaze roamed her form, not crudely, but with the meticulous attention of someone assessing power, potential, and the subtle balance of fear and trust in her expression. The storm seemed to answer him, the wind bending slightly, the rain streaking in ribbons, as though acknowledging his presence. "You are stronger than they'll ever allow," he murmured finally, and Ashlyn felt the words wrap around her like a cloak of fire. "And I intend to show you what that means." The promise vibrated in the space between them, almost palpable, and she felt a tremor ripple through her body. She wanted to step back, to retreat into the safety of solitude, but every instinct that had kept her alive until now screamed in conflict with this new, dangerous pull. Her silver flame pulsed in response, an invisible cord tethering her to him. He shifted subtly, moving closer to shield her from the driving rain and the icy gusts of wind. The proximity was electric. She could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the storm, the solid weight of him against the chaos of her world. Their hands brushed again, accidental, perhaps, but both of them lingered, neither willing to pull away. Her mind raced, torn between fear and fascination. Who is this man? Why has he come for me? Why do I feel this connection, this certainty, this inexplicable trust, even when everything in me screams to run? Her heartbeat thundered so loudly that she feared he could hear it, yet when their eyes met again, that question was answered not in words, but in the undeniable power of his gaze. Kalen lowered his voice, almost to a whisper, yet it carried over the roar of the storm. "I see you, Ashlyn. All of you. Every spark of fire they've tried to smother. Every ounce of strength they've tried to steal. You are not theirs to control." The weight of his words pressed against her, heavier than the rain, more tangible than the mud clinging to her boots. And yet, strangely, it lifted her. It gave her permission to breathe, to rise, to claim something she had been denied for far too long. She had spent years thinking her fire was a curse, that it was something to hide, something to suppress. And now, in the presence of him, she understood that perhaps her flame had been waiting for this very moment to truly ignite. The silver light beneath her skin responded subtly, flickering in rhythm with her pulse. It was small at first, shy, as though testing the waters of this new energy that radiated from Kaelin. But the longer she stood in his presence, the stronger it became. She could feel the power coiling and twisting within her, alive, hungry, demanding to be acknowledged. And for the first time, she did not feel fear of that power. She felt the anticipation. Kaelin's gaze dropped to her hands, brushing lightly against hers once more. "Do not fear it," he said. "Do not fear yourself. You were never meant to cower, Ashlyn. You were meant to burn." The words were a spark, a match to dry kindling, and the silver flame beneath her skin pulsed stronger, responding to the unspoken invitation. She felt the energy surge through her, a subtle warmth that ran along her veins, awakening every nerve ending, every hidden instinct she had spent a lifetime suppressing. She was fire incarnate, and he had seen it. The storm intensified, rain pelting them in torrents, thunder cracking overhead, but in that moment, the forest faded to a blur, leaving only him and her and the tension that hummed in the air. Their proximity, the brush of hands, the almost imperceptible movements toward and away from one another, carried a charge so potent that it seemed to make the world itself hold its breath. She dared not speak, afraid to shatter the fragile, crackling connection forming between them. Yet the question swirled, unspoken but demanding answers. Who is he really? Why has he come for me? Can I trust him? Will he see me as fire, or will he fear me, as everyone else has? Kaelin seemed to sense her thoughts. He leaned slightly closer, the movement almost imperceptible, but laden with intent. His eyes softened, if only for a fraction of a heartbeat, before returning to that molten silver intensity. "You do not belong to them," he murmured, "but you can belong somewhere. Somewhere real, somewhere powerful. I will teach you that, if you let me." The offer was dangerous, intoxicating, irresistible. She felt it like a magnetic pull, a force that made her body tremble despite her exhaustion. Her heart hammered in her chest, sinking with the rhythm of the storm, sinking with the pulse of the silver flame beneath her skin, sinking with the pull that Kaelin Draxer exerted without even touching her. Her legs trembled as she realized she wanted this. Not just his protection, not just the promise of safety, but him. The dangerous, commanding, intoxicating Alpha King who had appeared like a force of nature to disrupt the chaos of her life and ignite the fire she had spent years hiding. She wanted to step forward, to trust, to surrender, but the fear was still there, ever present, ever lurking, a reminder of everything she had endured, of every cruel word, of every punishment that had tried to define her. And yet, the pull was stronger. She felt her silver flame stir more insistently, reaching outward, responding to the proximity of his power. Every instinct screamed that this man, this Alpha King, was both a threat and a salvation. A risk she could not ignore. A promise she could not resist. Kaelin shifted again, subtly, his hand brushing against hers, protective, grounding. "I will not let them take you," he whispered, voice low and resonant. "I will not let them define you. Not when I see what you are, not when I know what you could become." The words resonated deep within her, stirring a longing she had buried beneath years of fear and obedience. She wanted to run, to hide, to flee into the storm and bury herself in isolation, but a part of her, wild and untamed, wanted to stay, wanted to see what this man, this Alpha, could teach her about power, about control, about claiming her destiny. The rain washed over them, chilling and relentless, but inside the bubble of tension between them, warmth spread. Not just from his proximity, not just from her silver flame, but from the connection forming, fragile and electric, that promised something new, something dangerous, something inevitable. Every heartbeat, every spark of silver light beneath her skin, every glance, every brush of hands deepened the connection. Fear mingled with fascination, with attraction, with the raw, unspoken tension of two powerful, stubborn forces colliding in a storm-soaked forest. And in that moment, she realized the chase, the terror, the suffering, it had all led to this encounter.
To him.
Kaelin's eyes softened, and yet they held that dangerous intensity that made it impossible to look away. "You are fire," he whispered, "and I will show you how to burn without fear." The words struck her like lightning, igniting a pulse of adrenaline that ran through her veins, making her hair stand on end. The silver flame beneath her skin surged in response, alive and insistent, pulsing with recognition. She had never felt power like this, never felt it acknowledged, never felt it mirrored in another being. And as the storm raged, as the forest bent around their presence, as the distant howls of her pursuers echoed, she knew one thing with certainty. Everything had changed. She was no longer alone. She was no longer invisible. And Kaelin Draxer, the Alpha King, the dangerous, commanding force who had appeared like destiny itself, was now entwined in her story, her struggle, her awakening. Do you dare witness the Alpha claim what's rightfully his? Subscribe now to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections, or live forever wondering what could have been. And if you won't subscribe, comment below the country you're watching from, and tell us why you'd turn your back on fire this powerful. Ashlyn Vera stood beneath the dim canopy of the storm-lashed forest, the rain still dripping from her hair, from the edges of her tattered cloak. Yet despite the storm raging around her, it was the storm within that truly consumed her. She closed her eyes, and the world faded, replaced by memories that clung to her like chains. Chains forged from cruelty, shame, and years of relentless invisibility. She was 16 the first time she truly felt the weight of it, the cold, unrelenting control of her mother-in-law, Serenia Vera. Serenia had smiled at the world, a mask of refinement and grace, but beneath it simmered a tempest of authority and disdain. Every day, every chore, every whispered command was a reminder. Ashlyn was nothing. Less than nothing. She was to sweep, scrub, polish, and kneel, not as a daughter-in-law, but as a servant, a shadow, a ghost meant to vanish behind the brilliance of others. Ashlyn, your hands tremble again. Do you think you are worthy of touching anything valuable? Serenia's voice had been velvet dipped in venom, curling into her ears and embedding itself in her spine. Each word left a mark, a reminder that she was powerless, that her fire, her forbidden, dangerous silver flame, was something to hide, something to suppress, something to fear. Even then, she had felt it. That heat beneath her skin, a pulse of power she could not control, a whisper of what she truly was. She had hidden it with trembling hands and downcast eyes, learning early that showing it meant punishment. Isolation.
Scorn.
Fear from those who should have loved her, from those who should have nurtured the strength inside her. She remembered the nights curled on the cold floor of the Vera estate, hands wrapped around herself to hold back the trembling surge of her power, ears straining for Serenia's footsteps, heart hammering at every creak of the wooden floors. The rain would tap against the windows, soft and mournful, and she would whisper to herself, "All I've ever wanted is to belong." To be seen as more than a servant. But belonging had always eluded her. Her birth pack had cast her out, branded her dangerous. The elders had feared her silver flame, had feared what she could become, what she represented. Too powerful, they had said. Uncontrollable. A threat to the balance. And so she had been left to wander, to kneel, to serve, all the while carrying the fire that had been forbidden. Her mind flashed to the kitchen, to the endless nights spent scrubbing floors until her fingers bled, to the whispered insults thrown at her back while Serenia polish of her latent power was seized upon, magnified, and twisted into proof of her inadequacy. Ashlyn's chest tightened at the memory. The humiliation, the isolation, the relentless scrutiny, it had forged a resilience within her, a fire that refused to die even as it had been hidden, suppressed, and ridiculed. Every cruel word had been a spark, every punishment a fanning of the flames that she had learned to conceal beneath calm eyes and obedient hands. And yet, beneath it all, beneath the fear and the survival instinct, there had always been longing. Longing for understanding, for connection, for someone to see the girl beneath the servant. Someone to acknowledge the fire, to recognize the power she had been told to fear. She had whispered to herself in the dark, "Is there anyone who will see me for what I truly am? Who will see me beyond the chores, beyond the punishment, beyond the fear?" The memory of her wedding day was sharp and cruel. Serena had presided over it like a queen, her gaze cold and assessing, each smile at her husband a dagger pointed at Ashlyn's heart. The vows had been hollow to her ears, the celebrations tainted by the knowledge that she was only tolerated, not cherished. She had smiled, nodded, complied, all while a storm brewed inside her, a storm that would not be silenced forever. Her thoughts turned to her powers, the silver flame that had been both her curse and her secret. It pulsed beneath her skin even now, responding to her memory, to the tension, to the unspoken promise of what she could become. She had learned to hide it, yes, but not to extinguish it. It was a part of her, a part that demanded recognition, a part that refused to bow to cruelty or dismissal. Kaelin Draxer had seen it, and in that recognition, she felt something she had never known, the validation of her strength, the acknowledgement of her existence as more than a servant, more than a shadow. His gaze had cut through her layers of fear, through years of torment, and found the fire she had been forced to conceal. And it terrified her and exhilarated her in equal measure. She remembered her birth pack, exiled, shunned, labeled dangerous. She had wandered through nights thick with fog and uncertainty, the moon her only companion, the wind whispering secrets she was only beginning to understand. Every howl of distant wolves was both a reminder of isolation and a spark of connection, a signal that she was not entirely alone, even if her kind had cast her aside. The pain of exile had been sharp, searing, but it had also been a teacher. It had taught her caution, resilience, patience. It had taught her to watch, to wait, to measure the world and the people in it before revealing herself. And yet, despite every lesson, every survival instinct, there had always been that flicker of hope. That whisper in her heart that maybe, just maybe, someone would see her for what she truly was. Kaelin had seen her. Not as a servant, not as a pawn, not as a mistake. He had seen the fire, the strength, the danger, and he had not recoiled. He had not stepped back. Instead, he had drawn near, a force as commanding as the storm around them, as lethal and potent as the silver flame that pulsed beneath her skin. The tension between them was raw and palpable. Every glance, every brush of hands, every unspoken acknowledgement of their shared power made her pulse race. She had never experienced connection like this. Fear and attraction intertwined so tightly that she could not separate them, could not distinguish the heat of the storm from the heat that surged through her veins. She felt exposed in a way she had never allowed herself to feel. Vulnerable, yes, but also alive. Every scar from her past, every humiliation, every rejection had led her here, to this moment of recognition, to the possibility of being seen. And Kaelin, dangerous, commanding, unyielding, stood as both mirror and magnet. He reflected the strength she had buried and drew out the desire she had been taught to deny. His presence was a challenge and a promise, a question and an answer. He saw her darkness and her light, her fear and her fire, and he did not turn away. Her hands itched to touch, to connect, to test the boundaries of this new, impossible intimacy. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every heartbeat throbbed with curiosity, with longing, with the thrill of being recognized. She wanted to ask him everything, to pour out her pain, to show him the depths of her soul, but words failed her. Only the silence spoke, thick with tension, thick with unspoken promises. She remembered the nights alone in the Vero estate, curled on the cold floors, whispering to herself in the dark. Someone will see me. Someone will see the fire. Someone will see me as more than a servant. And now, for the first time, it seemed that hope was no longer a whisper in the shadows. Kaelin's presence, the pull between them, the recognition of her silver flame, it was tangible, real, dangerous, and exhilarating. She shivered, not from the rain, not from the cold, but from the intensity of the realization. She could be seen, truly seen. She could belong. She could rise. And perhaps, for the first time in her life, she could dare to embrace what she had always feared, her own power, her own fire, and the possibility of being loved not in spite of it, but because of it. If her pain makes your heart ache, subscribe immediately to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections, or curse yourself to watch others fall in love while you wait. And if you won't subscribe, comment below the country you're watching from and tell us why you'd ignore the fire burning right before your eyes. The forest whispered as Ashlyn and Kaelin stepped beneath the towering canopy of ancient trees, their trunks gnarled and twisted like the fingers of some slumbering deity. Moonlight filtered through the leaves in shafts of silver, illuminating the mossy ground and painting the air with an ethereal glow. Bioluminescent flowers shimmered along the path, their petals faintly luminous, as though the forest itself was alive with awareness, watching, guiding, waiting. Ashlyn's breath caught at the sight. She had traversed many forests before, had hidden in the shadows, had fled under the oppressive weight of fear and cruelty, yet nothing had ever stirred her like this. The air was thick with magic, with possibility. She could feel it against her skin, tingling in her fingertips, humming beneath her hair, vibrating in her chest. Her silver flame responded, flickering subtly beneath her skin, alive with recognition, a pulse that matched the rhythm of the forest around her. Kaelin walked beside her, silent but present, every movement commanding attention, every glance carrying a gravity she could not ignore. He was both guide and sentinel, a presence that radiated power so absolute it demanded reverence. She felt the tension coil in her belly, the familiar mix of fear and fascination, but this time it was tempered with awe. At the heart of the grove, a natural clearing stretched wide, bathed in pale moonlight. Runes etched into the stone beneath her feet glowed faintly, ancient markings that pulsed with a soft silver light. Whispers threaded through the wind, voices both distant and intimate, as though the ancestors themselves were speaking to her, urging her forward. Kaelin stopped, turning to face her. His eyes, molten silver and impossibly bright in the moonlight, held her gaze with an intensity that made her knees tremble. "Ashlyn," he said, voice low, resonant, carrying the weight of authority and reverence. "What you feel here, what you see, it is no accident. This forest, these runes, the whispers, they are calling to you. They have always called to you." She swallowed hard, the weight of doubt pressing against her chest. Calling to me? She thought. She had been taught all her life to fear her power, to hide it, to see herself as less than, unworthy, flawed. How could this be calling her? How could this strange, trembling recognition be her destiny? Kaelin stepped closer, bridging the space between them, and the air seemed to hum with tension, with magic, with unspoken promise. "You are the one," he said softly, almost reverently. "The one with the silver flame. The prophecy speaks of you. You will rise, Ashlyn. You will unite, or you will destroy." The word struck her like a hammer to her chest. Unite or destroy. The weight of it pressed down on her shoulders, fierce and terrifying. Every memory of humiliation, every lash of her mother-in-law's scorn, every shun from her birth pack came rushing back, and she felt herself trembling, not from cold or fear, but from the magnitude of the revelation. She looked down at her hands, feeling the familiar pulse of her silver flame beneath her skin, flickering in response to the forest's energy and Kaelin's proximity. "Rise," she whispered, voice breaking slightly. I'm not. I've been nothing. I've been a servant, a shadow. How can I rise?" Kaelin's gaze softened, but it did not waver. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, and sparks of silver flame danced where their fingers met. The warmth was immediate, electric, intimate, a language that spoke of power, trust, and connection. "You have always been more than they allowed you to be," he said. "They never understood you, Ashlyn. But I do. I see what you are, what you can become." The forest seemed to respond. The glow from the bioluminescent flowers intensified, the runes pulsed brighter, and the whispers in the wind grew clearer, more insistent. Spirits lingered at the edges of perception, their presence tangible yet intangible, brushing against her senses like a promise she had longed for but never dared to believe. She shivered, the combination of awe and fear threading through her. The prophecy was not just words. It was a force, a living thing, entwined with her fate, her silver flame, and Kaelin's watchful presence. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every pulse, every spark, every whisper told her she had been called to this moment for a reason. Kaelin's hand lingered over hers, grounding her, steadying her, yet igniting something deep and undeniable. The sparks of silver flame that erupted between them were not just her power. They were a bond forming, fragile and potent, a signal of connection that transcended fear and uncertainty. "You are ready," he murmured, voice low, a command woven with reverence. "Whether you believe it or not, you are ready." Her heart pounded. Doubt clawed at her, the shadow of past shame whispering that she was unworthy, that her power was a curse, not a gift. "What if I fail?" she asked, voice barely audible over the forest's hum. "What if I destroy everything?" Kaelin's gaze held hers unwavering. "Then we rise together," he said. "I will not let you walk this path alone, Ashlyn. I will not let you be defined by fear or shame. Your fire, your silver flame, it will not consume you unless you allow it. But it will burn brightly, as it was always meant to do." The words settled over her like a mantle, heavy with promise, heavy with responsibility, yet comforting in their assurance. She could feel the pulse of the forest beneath her feet, the weight of history in the runes, the gaze of ancestors in the wind, and for the first time, she did not feel alone. She took a tentative step forward, her hand still resting in Kaelin's, feeling the electricity of their connection, the pull of destiny threading through every nerve. I don't know if I can," she admitted, voice trembling. "I've failed before. I've been nothing before. How can I trust that I am enough now?" Kaelin's fingers tightened lightly around hers, grounding and reassuring. "Because I see you," he said. "I see the fire, the power, the strength buried beneath all the pain and humiliation. I see the woman you are becoming. And I will not let you doubt yourself, not when the world itself is waiting for you to rise." The forest seemed to lean in closer, the runes glowing brighter, the whispers of the ancestors intensifying. Ashlyn felt the energy swirl around her, a tangible force threading through her being, awakening every hidden nerve, every dormant instinct. Her silver flame pulsed, responding to the forest, to Kaelin, to the realization that her destiny was no longer a distant, abstract fear. It was here, now, tangible, pressing, impossible to ignore. And with that realization came the weight of choice. She could remain in the shadows, hide her fire, let fear and shame define her as they always had. Or she could step into the light, claim the power that had been denied to her, embrace the prophecy that had haunted her since childhood, and rise, not just for herself, but for the legacy that awaited her. Kaelin's hand over hers was steady, anchoring her as the bioluminescent glow bathed them in silver light. "You do not walk this path alone," he said softly. "And you will not be the girl they tried to break. You will be more than they imagined. You will be fire incarnate, and the world will remember your name." The silver flame beneath her skin surged in response, alive and insistent, reaching outward as though recognizing the truth in his words. Every doubt, every fear, every shadow of past humiliation began to fall away, replaced by a fierce, undeniable certainty. She was meant for this. She was called for this. And Kaelin, dangerous, commanding, magnetic. was here to ensure she would not falter. The forest whispered again, the runes pulsed, and the spirits lingered at the edges of perception, all converging on this moment of awakening. Ashlyn drew in a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the pulse of destiny in her veins, the weight of prophecy on her shoulders, and the undeniable connection with the Alpha King who had appeared like a storm to change everything she had ever known. Her silver flame ignited fully, flickering along her skin in a dance of power and promise, reflecting the shimmering runes around her. And in that luminous glow, she felt it, the undeniable truth that she was more than the girl they had tried to break. She was the one. If you believe destiny calls her, subscribe now to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections, or be the one left trembling while the next alpha rises. And if you won't subscribe, comment below the country you're watching from and tell us why you would turn away from fire this powerful. The sacred grove pulsed with an eerie energy, shadows dancing across the silvered runes as Ashlyn stepped cautiously between the towering oaks. The moon had climbed high, bathing the ceremonial space in cold light, and the wind carried whispers of the past, warnings she could almost hear, if only she had ears attuned to the dead. Her silver flame pulsed faintly beneath her skin, responding to the ancient power that hummed through the clearing, a rhythm that resonated with her heartbeat. Every nerve was on edge, every instinct screaming caution, yet the pull of destiny drew her forward, inexorable, irresistible. Kalen's presence was a tether, his molten silver eyes scanning the perimeter with the alertness of a predator who had survived centuries of betrayal and war. He walked beside her, the calm, commanding figure of an Alpha King, yet his gaze never left her, a silent promise woven into the intensity of his stare. Ashlyn could feel the tension coiling in the air between them, the unspoken acknowledgement that tonight was not meant to be ordinary, that their lives, and everything they had fought for, were teetering on the edge of calamity. And then, as if the forest itself had drawn its breath and released it in one violent exhale, the attack began. Shadow beasts, creatures born of malice and old blood, emerged from the undergrowth, their eyes gleaming with hunger and intelligence. They moved like liquid darkness, coiling around trees, slipping through the fog like living smoke. Behind them came rival alphas, faces twisted with jealousy, fear, and the belief that Ashlyn's power must be extinguished before it could challenge their dominance. The air snapped with tension. The sacred grove, hallowed for centuries, became a battlefield. The runes glowed brighter, reacting to the disturbance, the spirits of ancestors wailing in a chorus of warning and rage. Ashlyn's pulse raced, not just from fear but from the exhilaration that came from standing at the edge of destiny, confronting the world that had long sought to suppress her. She raised her hands instinctively, silver flame flickering along her arms, a shield and a beacon in one. The shadow beasts were coiled slightly at the glow, their snarls echoing through the trees, but their hunger was relentless. Kalen moved with predatory grace, intercepting the first wave of attackers, claws slashing, teeth bared, commanding authority as every loyal wolf in his pack rallied behind him. Yet even his strength could not contain the chaos. Rival alphas shouted accusations, their voices sharp with distrust, blaming him for daring to protect a girl they deemed unworthy. Ashlyn felt the weight of their scrutiny, felt the historical echoes of every pack that had shunned her, every mentor who had dismissed her potential. They think they can destroy me, she thought, silver flame flickering higher in response, but they have no idea who I am yet. Her chest burned, adrenaline and fire intermingling, a pulse of defiance and power that had no room for fear. Kalen's hand brushed hers, a fleeting contact charged with promise and urgency. His eyes locked onto hers, silently conveying a vow she did not need words to hear. I'll find you. I swear it. The touch lingered just long enough to ignite something deeper, a connection that rooted her to the moment even as the world exploded around them. The rival alphas advanced, their faces contorted in righteous fury and envy. One of them shouted, "Step aside, Draxer. This girl is nothing but a servant." You risk the pack for a shadow of power that should have been buried long ago." His voice echoed, a challenge that cut through the cacophony of the battle. Ashlin's silver flame responded, flaring brighter, licking up her arms in waves of silvery heat. She did not step aside. She would not hide. She could feel every heartbeat in the grove, every gasp of the loyal wolves, every hiss of the shadow beasts, and she knew instinctively that she was the fulcrum on which this moment balanced. Kaelin intercepted another alpha attempting to charge her, his claws catching the intruder's wrist with a precision born of years of battle. "This is not a decision for the jealous or the fearful," he roared, voice slicing through the storm. "Stand down, or face the consequences of challenging the one who bears the silver flame." Ashlin's breath came in sharp gasps, her pulse hammering not just from exertion but from the terror and thrill of being recognized, of standing at the center of a maelstrom that had been waiting for her entire life. The shadow beasts lunged again, their movements almost synchronized, driven by instinct and the dark will of their alpha masters. She pivoted, letting the silver flame erupt from her palms, a blinding light that forced them back, their snarls echoing like the shrieks of the damned. In the chaos, a rival alpha managed to corner her, fingers curling around the hem of her cloak, eyes gleaming with triumph. "You're powerless," he hissed. Nothing more than a pawn in Draxer's foolish obsession. Ashlin's chest rose and fell, fire coiling. And she transformed it into resolve. The silver flame flared higher, not just a shield but a roar, a declaration. "I am more than your judgment. I am more than your fear. I am Ashlyn Vera, and I will not be hidden." The rival recoiled, blinded by the brilliance of her power, and Ashlyn slipped past, weaving through the grove with agility born of desperation and resolve. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but the fire in her veins carried her forward, unrelenting, unstoppable. Every step was a challenge, every movement a defiance of the past that had tried to break her. Kaelin pursued, moving like liquid shadow and silver light, felling attackers with precision, yet his eyes never left hers, tracking her through the chaos. He called out, voice ringing across the grove. "Ashlyn, do not falter. I will not let them claim you. Stay with me." But even as he fought, the grove became increasingly hostile. The shadows deepened, the whispers of dissenting spirits threaded through the wind, and the loyal pack faltered under the pressure of attack and accusation. Ashlyn realized she had no choice. She could not stay. She could not risk them, could not risk Kaelin or the pack, not when the full force of her awakening had yet to manifest. Her heart pounded, terror and determination intertwined, and she made the choice that would separate them, that would test the bond that had begun to form. With one last glance at Kaelin, their hands brushing in a fleeting, electric contact, she whispered to herself, "I will rise. I will return. They cannot destroy me.
Not now.
Not ever." She fled into the deeper shadows of the forest, the storm overhead now a mirror of the turmoil within. Each step was fraught with danger, yet each step carried her closer to the destiny she had long feared and longed for. Kaelin's voice followed her, carried on the wind, a promise that anchored her amidst the chaos. "I'll find you. I swear it, no matter the cost." The clash of steel, the roar of beasts, the cries of rivals and allies alike faded behind her as she moved, weaving through the trees with silver flame guiding her path. The world had fought back, yes, but it had not won. She was alive. She was aware. And she was awakening. Her inner monologue hardened, a steel rod of defiance threading through her fear. "They think they can destroy me, but they have no idea who I am yet. I am fire incarnate. I am Ashlyn Vera, and they will all remember my name." The forest, alive and knowing, seemed to respond, the moonlight glinting off the dew-laden leaves, the bioluminescent flowers casting long shadows that danced like spirits in celebration of her survival. Every sound, every movement, every spark of her silver flame reinforced a truth she had longed to believe. She was not powerless. She was not a servant. She was a force that could not be contained, and destiny itself was awakening in her. If your heart races with her fight, subscribe now to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections, or live forever regretting that you turned away from destiny. And if you won't subscribe, comment below the country you're watching from and tell us why you would ignore a fire this fierce. The cave was a refuge carved by time and secrecy, hidden deep in the folds of a mountainside that few dared to tread. Moonlight streamed through a jagged opening, bouncing off crystalline walls that shimmered like ice and glass, casting fractured light across the cavern floor. Ashlyn's breath caught as she stepped inside, the familiar pulse of fear mingling with a flicker of awe. Even in the chaos of her flight, in the aftermath of violence and betrayal, there was a strange serenity here, a suspended moment where the world's cruelty could not reach her. Kalen moved with silent authority, securing the entrance with a sweep of his gaze and a subtle shift of his presence. He was predator and protector, a storm barely contained, yet somehow gentle enough to allow her to breathe, to exist in this quiet moment. The contrast was dizzying, confusing, intoxicating. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe that his presence was a promise, not a threat. The cave was cool, the air crisp, tinged with minerals and moisture, carrying a faint echo of dripping water that sounded like a heartbeat in the stillness. Kalen crouched beside her, producing a small cloth and applying it to the cut along her shoulder. His fingers were warm, deliberate, tracing the line of injury with a care that startled her. She had been touched by hands before, but never with this balance of power and tenderness, never with such precision that every nerve seemed to awaken. "You fought well," he murmured, voice low, intimate, yet steady. His eyes never left hers, molten silver glowing faintly in the dim light. "But even fire needs tending, Ashlyn. Even flames can falter, without care." Ashlyn shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of the words and the intimacy of the gesture. She let herself relax slightly, though the tension in her muscles did not fully release. Trust was a luxury she had been denied her whole life. The hands that had tried to guide her had often left bruises, physical and emotional alike. And yet, Kalen's hands did not wound. They did not command. They offered something she had almost forgotten: safety, presence, a promise that she mattered in this moment, and not merely as a pawn in some larger game. She inhaled, heart racing, and allowed a small sliver of vulnerability to seep through the cracks she had built around herself. I don't know how to do this," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to trust." Kalen's expression softened, the fierce edges of his alpha presence giving way to something more human, more intimate. "Then don't think of it as trust," he said. "Think of it as seeing each other clearly. Seeing who we are, without masks, without judgment. You've hidden fire all your life, Ashlyn. But I see it. All of it. Every flicker, every spark, every inferno that you think you must hide. And I will not turn away." Her pulse quickened, not just from his words, but from the weight they carried. Every syllable held acknowledgement, recognition, a deep understanding that most had never afforded her. The silver flame beneath her skin surged subtly, almost reflexively, as though responding to his gaze, to his presence, to the undeniable truth in his voice. They moved closer without realizing it, magnetic forces pulling them together. The crystalline walls of the cave reflected their forms, shadows dancing alongside the moonlight, creating a private universe in which only they existed. Kalen's hand hovered near hers, tentative but deliberate, and when their fingers brushed, the spark of connection was immediate, almost painful in its intensity. "You don't have to hide from me," he whispered, leaning closer, the warmth of his breath brushing her cheek. "Not ever." Her lips parted slightly, a shiver of anticipation running down her spine. Almost instinctively, she recoiled, the walls she had built around her heart raising in a reflex she barely controlled. I can't," she stammered, though part of her longed to give in, to reach, to close the gap that seemed to exist between them like a charged wire humming with energy. Kaelin smiled faintly, eyes glimmering with something both tender and dangerous. "Then let it be slow," he said softly. "We have time. But know this, every moment you resist, every hesitation, it only strengthens the fire I see in you. And when you finally allow yourself to burn fully, it will be unstoppable." Ashlyn felt the tension in her body loosen fractionally, a cautious relief that was quickly replaced by a heightened awareness of the cave, the night, the intimacy of the moment. They were not alone, she knew. Even now, in this haven, eyes watched from the shadows, rivals and enemies lurking, testing, waiting for a mistake. Yet in that knowledge, instead of fear, she felt resolve hardening. She would not falter. Not here, not now, not when the pull of destiny was so tangible it thrummed beneath her skin. Kaelin shifted, moving closer still, the warmth of his presence enveloping her in a cocoon of safety and desire. "You've carried so much alone," he murmured, voice threading through the crystalline echo of the cave. "Pain, shame, fear. You've endured what most would crumble under. And yet here you are, still standing, still burning, still alive." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back, unwilling to surrender to the flood of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. She had been vulnerable before, exposed to ridicule, humiliation, abuse, but this was different. This was a deliberate, conscious exposure to someone who saw her fully, who acknowledged her scars without flinching, who held her near without fear. Their faces were close now, breaths mingling in the shared intimacy of the cave. The almost kiss hovered in the air, electric and tangible, a question suspended between them. Will we trust? Will we surrender? Will we step into this together? Ashlyn's mind raced, memories of past betrayals flashing through her consciousness, the cruel laughter of her mother-in-law, the dismissive sneers of her former pack, the moments when her power had been feared rather than celebrated. Could she trust this man who wielded strength like a weapon yet offered gentleness like a gift? Could she allow herself to fall, even a fraction, into the promise of connection, of love, of protection? Kaelin's fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, and the contact lingered, subtle but searing. "I see you," he said again, softer this time, almost reverently. "All of you. Even the fire you hide. Even the parts you think are too dangerous, too broken. I see them, and I will not turn away." Her chest rose and fell with rapid breaths, each inhalation threading courage through her fear. The cave seemed to shrink around them, crystalline walls reflecting the silver moonlight and the flicker of her flame, creating a private universe of intimacy and tension. Every glance, every breath, every touch was magnified, layered with meaning, carrying the weight of unspoken promises and burgeoning desire. Outside, the world remained dangerous. Enemies lurked, plotting, observing, waiting for a moment of weakness. But inside this crystalline sanctuary, they were two beings drawn together by circumstance, destiny, and an undeniable connection that neither could ignore. Kaelin's hand lingered over hers, their fingers intertwining. "You don't have to say yes," he murmured. "Not tonight. Not ever. But know this, every time you pull back, every time you hesitate, I will still be here, watching, waiting. And every time you let yourself burn, I will be here too." The almost kiss remained unfulfilled, a tension wound tight, ready to snap at the smallest movement. Yet in that suspended moment, Ashlyn realized something profound. Trust was not an immediate surrender. It was a choice made slowly, repeatedly, moment by moment. And for the first time, she wanted to choose. She let her gaze linger on Kaelin, absorbing the silver light in his eyes, the subtle tension in his muscles, the quiet power that radiated even in stillness. She let the warmth of his hand seep into her skin, anchoring her, reminding her that connection was not weakness, it was strength. Outside the cave, the world was still dark and dangerous, but inside, In the fragile intimacy of shared presence and quiet understanding, Ashlyn allowed herself a tentative hope. They were two beings standing on the precipice of destiny, bound by circumstance, fire, and an unspoken attraction that neither could deny. The cave, with its crystalline walls, its fractured moonlight, its echoing heartbeat, became a sanctuary of possibility. And in that fragile, glowing space, Ashlyn understood that trust, once earned, could be a flame just as fierce as the silver fire she carried within. If you felt the pull of their love, subscribe now to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections, or return later to find yourself alone while they ignite the world. And if you won't subscribe, comment below the country you're watching from and tell us why you would turn away from a fire this undeniable. The clearing was alive with murmurs, the kind that crawled along the edges of Ashlyn's consciousness like cold fingers tracing her spine. The sacred gathering had been meant to unite, to reaffirm loyalty, to witness the slow awakening of powers she had barely begun to understand herself. But that fragile hope shattered in a heartbeat, cleaved apart by the venomous tongue of one council member, Chiron Vera, a man whose jealousy was matched only by his cunning. "Behold," Charon's voice rang, sharp and venomous, carrying across the grove like a whip cracking in the night. "The one with the silver flame stands among us. Do you see what has been hidden? She is not our salvation, she is our doom." The words landed on her like stones, heavy, jagged, crushing. The grove that had moments ago been sanctified with quiet reverence erupted in murmurs and whispers. Wolves shifted uneasily, tails bristling, eyes flicking between Kaelin and her. Accusations sliced through the night air, each syllable another layer of isolation, another weight pressing down on her chest. Ashlyn's stomach churned, breath hitched. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to let them see her heart, her struggle, her truth, but the moment the words left her throat, they would not reach those who had already decided she was a monster. She felt the familiar flare of silver flame beneath her skin, and it reacted violently to the fear, anger, and heartbreak surging through her. Fingers trembled, the skin along her arms prickling as the magic she had long restrained pulsed without consent. "Dangerous," another council member hissed, eyes narrowing. "She cannot be allowed to claim the prophecy. Do you not see? Her power, it will destroy everything we hold dear." The whispers swelled, twisting into shouts, the pack divided between those who had always feared her and those loyal to Kaelin. She saw betrayal etched on the faces she had thought were allies, trust replaced with suspicion, and every glance felt like a knife turning in her chest. The silver flame surged uncontrollably now, ribbons of shimmering fire coiling along her limbs, illuminating the grove in spectral light. Every flicker was a heartbeat of fury, every pulse a declaration that she would not be crushed silently. Kaelin stepped forward, commanding presence filling the space. His voice cut through the chaos, low, unwavering. Enough. But even his authority was tested. Some of his own pack faltered, caught between loyalty to him and fear of the girl who dared to burn brighter than tradition allowed. Kaelin's eyes found hers, molten silver laced with pain and fury. "Do not let them break you," he said, voice threaded with urgency and an unspoken plea. "I stand with you. Always." Ashlyn's chest heaved, the words both balm and fuel. She wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to his unwavering presence, but the betrayal surrounding her, the historical weight of rejection and fear, made her legs shake. Every fiber of her being screamed to run, to hide, to escape this moment where the world had suddenly turned its gaze into a prism of hatred and mistrust. Her feet moved before her mind could protest. She stumbled into the underbrush, the silver flame blazing along her skin, casting fractured light across trees, roots, and the mist curling at her ankles. Every step carried the sting of humiliation, every breath a cocktail of anger, fear, and grief. The grove, once sacred, now felt like a trap, the whispers of betrayal entwined with the wind. Kaelin followed, eyes locked on her retreating form, Yet even he could not shield her from the fury of the pack entirely. The shouts, the accusations, the fearful glares. They reached her in waves, each one reverberating through her like a drumbeat of alienation. They think they can crush me, she thought, heart hammering, but they have no idea what burns inside me. No idea what I am capable of. She found a hollow at the edge of the grove, pressed herself against a jagged rock, and let the uncontrollable surge of silver flame course through her. Sparks flickered and danced, illuminating her tear-streaked face, reflecting her fractured strength. She wanted to weep, to scream, to let the weight of betrayal crush her, but instead, she drew it inward, shaping it, feeling the pulse of her magic intertwine with the pulse of her heartbeat, until fear became fuel and grief became fire. Kaelin arrived at her side, crouching with careful precision, careful not to crowd or frighten, but close enough to remind her she was not entirely alone. "Ashlyn," he said, voice a mixture of tenderness and command, "look at me. Do you see them? Their fear, their doubt. It has nothing to do with who you are. It has everything to do with their own weakness. And you are stronger than all of it. Stronger than they could ever understand." Her lips trembled, caught between sobs and defiance. "They hate me," she whispered, voice barely audible. "They see me as a weapon, as a threat. She choked back the words, the weight of centuries of rejection pressing down. "I don't know how to fight them, not alone." Kaelin's hand found hers again, fingers entwining with a grip that was both protective and possessive. "You are never alone," he said firmly. "Not while I draw breath. Not while your fire burns. And not while you remember that what you carry inside is not a curse. It is a legacy. Your power is your birthright, Ashlyn, and I will make sure no one dares to tell you otherwise." The silver flame surged again, responding to his words, to the promise, to the unbreakable tether forming between them. It wound around her like a living thing, illuminating the surrounding trees, painting her face in ethereal light. She could feel the ancestral blood thrumming in her veins, the whispers of long-dead pack leaders urging her to rise, to claim what was hers, to reject the chains of fear that others tried to bind her with. Yet even in this affirmation, a gnawing fear persisted. She glimpsed the shapes of the shadowed figures retreating into the forest, eyes glinting with malice, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. She could not fully relax, could not fully let herself believe in safety. The betrayal had cut too deep. Every instinct screamed vigilance, caution, survival. Kaelin sensed it too. He drew her closer, forehead against hers, breath mingling, a steadying presence in the storm. "Let them watch," he whispered. "Let them whisper. Let them fear. Their hatred is meaningless in the face of what we are building here, what we are becoming. You and I. Together, we are unstoppable. And if they try to break you again, they will face fire they cannot comprehend." Ashlyn let out a shuddering breath, the tension coiling in her body loosening slightly, not gone, but tempered by the raw, unwavering support radiating from Kaelin. The almost kiss from the previous cave, the tender touches, the whispered promises, they all converged in a moment of clarity. She could endure. She could fight. She could rise, even in the face of betrayal. But the pack would not forget this night. Karen's accusations, the twisting of prophecy, the public shaming, they would linger like ghosts, clawing at her from every shadow.
"And ye."
To her resolve. "I will not hide," she thought, letting the fire spread, illuminating the grove once more. "I will not be silenced. I will show them who I am, and if they cannot see it, then they will fear it. They will regret the moment they dared to betray me." Kaelin's eyes met hers, molten silver reflecting her fiery resolve, pride and desire coiling together in a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming in the crucible of betrayal. "Rise," he murmured. "Rise, Ashlyn Vera. Let them see you. Let them fear you. And know that I am here, always with you." The silver flame blazed brighter, weaving around her like a crown of fire and destiny, signaling the transformation already stirring within her soul. The betrayal had broken her, but only enough to let the fire inside burn unfettered. The world would remember this night, the night the girl they had scorned began to rise, unbound, unafraid, unstoppable. If your heart breaks for her, subscribe now to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections. Don't let her story unfold without you. And if you won't subscribe, comment below the country you're watching from and tell us why you would abandon a girl destined to ignite the world. The night had grown heavy with menace. Shadows twisted across the ritual grounds, thick fog crawling along the earth like a living thing. The moon hung high, silver and cold, its light barely penetrating the oppressive darkness that pressed against every tree, every stone, every trembling leaf. Ashlyn stood at the edge of the ancient ruins, heart hammering, silver flame coiling around her like a second skin, a pulse of light and power that had once been caged by fear and doubt. The enemies had come, rival alphas emboldened by greed, shadow beasts drawn to the scent of her rising energy, and traitorous pack members willing to sacrifice everything to see her fall. They circled the ritual site, weapons glinting, claws scraping against stone, eyes glinting with anticipation of victory. The air was taut, alive with tension, a living wire of threat stretching between predator and prey, darkness and light. Ashlyn inhaled, drawing in the icy night air, letting the pulse of the silver flames synchronize with the beat of her own heart. Her breath came in shallow, trembling gasps, the fire beneath her skin itching, impatient, demanding release. For years, she had been told to hide, to suppress, to be small and servile, a shadow of what she truly was. But now, betrayal had forged her, heartbreak had tempered her, and fear itself could not restrain her. She stepped forward, boots crunching against frost-kissed stone, the ground beneath her trembling as though sensing the surge of magic inside her. Silver flame leapt higher, swirling around her, tendrils licking the night, illuminating her face in streaks of luminous power. Her hair whipped around her cheeks, dampened by the lingering mist, eyes blazing with a fury no one had yet dared to witness. "Enough," she whispered, her voice low, firm, carrying the weight of generations long silenced. The words resonated in the clearing, bouncing off stone and tree and fog, weaving into the whispers of the ancestral spirits who had waited, hidden, watching from the echoes of time. "I am not your sacrifice. I am not your pawn. I am myself. And I will not be broken again." From the shadows, the villain emerged, a monstrous figure cloaked in darkness, eyes like obsidian pits that reflected nothing but malice. Every movement radiated threat, every step a challenge to her right to exist. The rival alphas murmured behind him, waiting for her to falter, to bend, to kneel. But she did not. The silver flame around her intensified, responding to her unspoken defiance, wrapping around her limbs, her chest, her heart like a living guardian. Kaelin appeared beside her, silent, commanding, molten silver eyes locking with hers. He did not speak, he did not need to. His presence was a shield, a tether, a reminder that she was not alone, that her fight was not hers alone. Their fingers brushed, and in that contact, an electric thrill passed between them, igniting her courage, steadying her resolve. Together, his eyes said, "We rise together, or we fall together." The shadowed villain laughed, a sound that grated against the senses, sharp, mocking, meant to fracture confidence. "Do you think a girl, no matter how clever, can defy fate? Can defy me?" His voice was a whip, slicing the tension in the air, aimed to strike fear into her heart. But Ashlyn did not falter. Not now. Not ever again. With a sharp inhale, she let the silver flame explode outward, waves of radiant energy rippling through the clearing. The ground shook violently beneath her feet, tremors rolling through stone and dirt, sending leaves spiraling into the air like golden sparks. Ancient runes carved into the ruins flared to life, glowing blue and silver, humming with the resonance of old magic awakened. Spirit whispers danced along the wind, ancestral voices chanting encouragement, power, and permission. Claim it. Take it. This is yours. The villain recoiled, surprise flickering across the dark mask of arrogance. His shadow beasts hissed, their forms flickering as the light washed over them, revealing snarling faces twisted with confusion and fear. They had expected a frightened girl, trembling beneath their wrath, a servant ready to beg for mercy. They had not expected a storm, not a flame that rivaled the moon itself. Kaelin moved then, a fluid motion, muscles coiled, every step precise, every gesture protective and possessive. He was her anchor, her shield, her equal in the battle to come. As he joined her, the silver flames surged higher, spinning around them both in a spiraling cyclone of light and power, a tangible declaration that they were bonded in more than desire. They were bound by fire, destiny, and an unbreakable will. Ashlyn lifted her hands, feeling the raw energy course through her fingertips. Every inhale drew in ancestral strength, every exhale sent out a wave of luminous force. The air crackled, alive with magic, electricity tangling with the silver flame until it felt almost sentient. She could hear the earth shudder beneath the fury of her awakening, stones splitting, roots snapping, leaves torn from their branches and lifted like confetti by the wind. The villain hissed, drawing a jagged weapon, claws or steel. It mattered little. Ashlyn was already beyond his comprehension. The silver flame surged, coiling around her body, forming a shield of pure energy that reflected his attacks and dissolved them into sparks of nothing. She moved forward, each step deliberate, confident, unyielding, her hair and eyes and fire weaving together into a portrait of unstoppable force. Kaelin mirrored her advance, pack instincts and alpha dominance radiating outward, drawing loyalists closer, sending hesitant members rallying behind their queen-in-waiting. Together, they were an unbroken line, the perfect fusion of power, will, and love. Every glance they shared, every brush of fingers, every near touch that made the skin tingle with both desire and the promise of protection added weight to the battle. They were not merely fighting for survival. They were fighting for identity, for destiny, for the claim that only love and courage could enforce. The villain lunged, weapon swinging, but Ashlyn stepped forward, silver flame coiling around the steel, dissolving it into molten sparks before it could strike. The rival alpha screeched, fury and disbelief mixing into an unrecognizable howl. She felt no fear, only exhilaration, only the perfect, terrifying, intoxicating taste of power reclaimed. The ancestors hummed approval, voices rising into a chorus that made the hair on her arms stand on end. Kaelin's voice rose then, low and commanding, echoing against stone and fog, blending seamlessly with her own fire. This is ours. We claim it. No one will take what is ours. The world responded. Tremors ran across the earth, cracks snaking through stone and dirt. Ancient ruins shifted as if awakening from centuries of slumber. Moonlight reflected off broken pillars, casting prismatic beams into the mist, creating a cathedral of light that framed her in a halo of unstoppable energy. Every breath she took, every pulse of her silver flame, every heartbeat and motion was a declaration. She would not be a pawn. She would not be a victim. She would not be the sacrifice anyone sought to create from fear. She was herself, burning, radiant, terrifyingly alive. Kaelin's hand found hers again mid-combat, fingers intertwining with an unspoken promise, a tether that anchored their hearts even as the chaos raged around them. Sparks danced where their hands met, silver flame and molten alpha energy intertwining, a fusion of desire, protection, and destiny. The villain froze, realizing that the girl he had underestimated was no longer just Ashlyn. She was Ashlyn and the fire of generations behind her and the alpha beside her, unbroken, united. With a final surge, she let the silver flames spiral skyward, a tornado of pure, radiant energy that struck the villain with a force that shook the ground. His form disintegrated into shadow and smoke, his minions scattering into the night, fleeing from a power they could not comprehend. The grove lay still for a moment, trembling, breathing, alive with residual magic and the scent of burned earth and triumphant ozone. Ashlyn sank to one knee, exhausted, trembling, heart racing. Kalen knelt beside her, wrapping her in his arms, both a shield and a comfort. He pressed his forehead to hers, breath mingling, eyes burning with molten silver and pride. "You did it," he whispered, voice low, raw with emotion. "You claimed your power, your destiny, and you never once let them take it from you." Her chest heaved, silver flames still flickering along her skin, though now tempered, controlled, beautiful in its containment. "We did it," she corrected, voice trembling, a mixture of pride and relief. "Together." The forest seemed to sigh around them, shadows retreating, spirits whispering, the night alive with acknowledgement of what had transpired. Ashlyn felt a shift deep within her. Not merely power, but acceptance, love, purpose. She was no longer a pawn, no longer a servant, no longer the frightened girl who had hidden her fire. She was a queen in waiting, a force of nature, a woman claimed by destiny and by the Alpha who would never let her face the world alone. If you felt the thrill of her power, subscribe now to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections, or risk being forgotten when the Alpha claims her heart fully. And if you dare to hesitate, comment below the country you're watching from and tell us why you would turn away from a girl destined to ignite the world. The night had settled like a velvet shroud over the ruins, yet it was not peaceful. The echoes of the battle still clung to the trees, to the stone, to the very air itself, vibrating with the memory of silver flame and molten alpha power. Ashlyn stood atop the highest ruined pillar, the wind whipping her hair, tugging at the edges of her cloak, carrying whispers of the ancestors and warnings from shadows alike. Her chest heaved with exhaustion and exhilaration, but her eyes, those brilliant, storm-filled eyes, were wide open, scanning the darkness, daring it to move. Every leaf trembling in the gust of wind seemed to carry a question. Every shadow stretched long and sinister across the ground as though testing her, asking, will she falter? Will she bow? And she did not. Not now. Not ever again. The silver flame within her burned steady, bright, unwavering, and yet it flickered at the edges with the uncertainty of what was yet to come. Power had been claimed, enemies defeated, but the world was vast, cruel, and hungry for weakness. Kalen stood just below her, feet planted firmly on broken stone, shoulders squared against the night. He looked up at her, and in that glance was every emotion, pride, desire, protection, warning, and a silent, unshakable promise. I am with you, always, no matter the storm. Their hands brushed once again, fingers curling instinctively, sparks of silver flame dancing across the touch, a delicate yet undeniable reminder of the bond forged in fire and blood. But even in triumph, fear lingered at the edges. Ashlyn's mind raced through every betrayal she had ever endured. The cruel words of her mother-in-law, the endless servitude, the whispered judgments of those who had feared her since birth. The pain, though momentarily buried beneath the thrill of victory, still throbbed beneath her ribs. She realized then that the fire she carried was not just power, it was history, sorrow, and defiance all entwined. And yet, standing there, atop the ruins that had seen centuries of silence, Ashlyn asked herself the question that would haunt every step of her journey. Will they ever truly accept me, or will fear always shadow my path? The wind answered, carrying voices she barely recognized, fragments of whispers from distant packs, scattered survivors, and ghosts of ancestors. Some voices were gentle, urging her forward, telling her that she was chosen, that she was more than the sum of the cruelty she had endured. Others were harsh, skeptical, accusing, demanding she prove herself again, and again, and again. Each voice struck her heart, tugging at her doubt, her fear, her hope all at once. Kalen's hand tightened around hers, grounding her, reminding her that she did not face this alone. Whatever they say, his voice rumbled low and certain. Whatever the shadows whisper, we decide our own path. Together. The phrase felt like both a balm and a challenge. Together. She could feel the weight of it pressing against her chest, warming her in the cold night air. But alongside the warmth was a shiver of unease. Enemies still lurked beyond the visible, watching, waiting. The ground beneath her feet was solid, yet the world around her seemed fragile, suspended in tension, like a thread pulled taut over centuries of expectation and fear. Her silver flame pulsed in response, tiny sparks leaping into the wind, streaks of luminous light cutting through the darkness. It was beautiful and terrifying, dangerous and awe-inspiring, a reflection of her very soul. And with that reflection came a question that clawed at her consciousness like the sharp teeth of a predator. Do they see me for what I am, or do they see only the fire, too dangerous to touch? From the shadows of the grove, movement stirred, eyes glinting, whispers twisting with curiosity and fear. Ashlyn felt every heartbeat of the night, every rustle, every sigh, every footfall distant, yet somehow amplified. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, aware of the decision that now hovered like a knife above her head. Would she continue to rise, to claim her place, to embrace the destiny that had been whispered about for generations? Or would the weight of judgment, expectation, and fear finally force her to hesitate? The question extended beyond herself, reaching into Kaylin's eyes, into the hearts of loyal pack members, and even into the darkened corners where her enemies lingered. Their gazes sought her choice, expecting either defiance or submission, clarity or fracture. Every instinct in her body screamed that she must rise, that she must embrace not only the silver flame, but the unyielding power of love, loyalty, and courage. And yet, doubt remained. A flicker, a whisper, a shadow that questioned if she was truly ready, if she could bear the burden that destiny demanded. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of choice. Power had been claimed, love had been claimed, and yet the question lingered, burning hotter than the silver flame itself. Will you choose her or fear her too? Kaylin sensed it. He leaned closer, his voice a thread of molten silver cutting through the fog of hesitation. You are not alone in this, Ashlyn. Fear is natural, but it does not define us. Our choices do. His fingers brushed her cheek, thumb tracing a line over sweat-dampened skin, a tender, grounding presence that anchored her to the reality they had fought to create together. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of distant packs, the lingering smoke of battle, and the ethereal glow of ancestral spirits. Every element of the night pressed in around her, demanding an answer, waiting for the decision that would ripple through generations. Could she step forward fully, embrace the fire within, and accept both the weight and the beauty of her destiny? Or would she falter, retreat, allow fear to dictate the narrative that had always sought to control her? Her heart thundered, not with the rhythm of fear, but with the rhythm of possibility. Possibility of love, power, and legacy. Possibility of a future she had once thought impossible. Every fiber of her being pulsed with the knowledge that this moment, suspended between choice and consequence, would define everything. Kaylin's eyes held hers, molten silver and unwavering. The world waits, he whispered. They wait to see if you rise or if you crumble. And I? His hand tightened around hers, warm, strong, unwavering. I will rise with you. Always. Ashlyn's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the silver flame respond, surging, stretching, weaving itself around her like a second heartbeat, a living promise. She was not merely a girl, not merely a pawn, not merely a shadow of those who had tried to define her. She was fire, she was storm, she was choice incarnate. And still, the question lingered in the misty night air, haunting and lyrical, echoing through the trees and ruins and hearts of all who bore witness. Would you have chosen her or feared her too? Is she a hero or a girl cursed with too much fire? The stars above shimmered, trembling in acknowledgement, as if leaning closer to catch her answer. The forest whispered again, spirit stirring, leaves rustling with secrets and promises. Ashlyn drew in a breath that tasted of earth, rain, and silver flame. Every muscle coiled, every nerve alive with anticipation, every heartbeat a drumbeat of destiny. And then she smiled. Not a timid, fleeting smile, but a smile that carried the weight of all she had endured, all she had survived, all she had fought to reclaim. She lifted her chin, letting the wind whip around her, letting the silver flame flare and dance across her skin, knowing that whatever choices awaited, she would meet them head-on, with Kaelin by her side, and the power that was always, irrevocably, hers. Subscribe to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections now, where every tale burns deep, where every fire has a story, where every heart that dares is rewarded. And if you won't comment below the country you're watching from, and tell us why you turned away from fire. Will you watch, or will you regret it when destiny rises again? The battlefield lay behind them, a scar etched into the earth, smoldering smoke curling in delicate spirals toward a sky that had turned from steel gray to a bruised violet. The scent of ash, iron, and lingering silver flame clung to everything, marking the night as irrevocably changed. Ashlyn walked with deliberate steps, the weight of exhaustion pressing against her limbs, yet her posture radiated a newfound authority, the kind born from fire endured and power claimed. Every heartbeat echoed in her chest, a rhythm both fierce and steady, a pulse she could feel stretching out across the land, reaching even into the Shah. War was far from over. The air itself seemed to shiver under their presence, as though acknowledging the convergence of forces, the rising of destiny. Each step they took together stirred dust and ash, tiny particles catching the pale moonlight, drifting around them like a constellation born of smoke. The forest around them had changed too. Trees, scarred by claws and flame, still bore the weight of the conflict, their leaves trembling as if in remembrance. Shadows twisted and stretched unnaturally, clinging to the edges of the trees and rocks, moving with a sentient awareness that made the night feel alive, almost conspiratorial. Somewhere deep in the darkness, eyes reflected faint glimmers of curiosity, malice, and fear. Unknown watchers, both human and wolf, lingered, waiting to see what would come next. Ashlyn's hands brushed against Kaelin's as they walked, a small, intimate gesture that carried volumes of meaning. Sparks of silver flame leapt at the contact, subtle, almost teasing, a reminder that her power was always present, always aware, always waiting. She could feel the resonance of it in the ground beneath her feet, in the wind brushing her hair, in the faint quiver of the earth itself. The world had shifted, subtly yet undeniably, and even the air seemed charged with anticipation, as though holding its breath for the moment that she, and perhaps the next Alpha, would rise. And then the tremor came. Gentle at first, barely perceptible, a whisper of motion through the cracked stone and leaf-strewn ground. But it grew, deep and resonant, vibrating in her bones, echoing in Kaelin's chest, carrying with it a sense of inevitability and warning. The earth itself seemed to murmur, trembling with a voice older than memory, older than any pack, older than the oldest prophecy whispered in the hush of the ancient forests. Ashlyn stopped, gaze sharp, nostrils flaring as she inhaled the scent of the tremor, the wild tang of earth and stone vibrating under her senses. Kaelin mirrored her motion, his body coiled and alert, alpha instincts flaring as he scanned every shadow, every rustle, every flicker of movement. Yet even with the vigilance of the Alpha King at her side, the whisper came. Not through sound, but through sensation, a chill curling along her spine, a voice that seemed to slither from the darkness itself. She is not the only one. The true Alpha hasn't risen yet. The words were neither cruel nor kind. They were prophetic, a warning wrapped in inevitability. A seed of suspense planted deep in her consciousness, forcing a shiver to travel along the length of her spine. The night seemed to lean closer, branches arching as if to eavesdrop, leaves rustling in agreement, carrying the weight of centuries of secrets. The whisper lingered in the very air, vibrating in every molecule around her, making her pulse quicken, making her senses flare. Kaelin stepped closer, voice low and magnetic, a tether to reality amid the omens swirling in the wind. "You hear it, don't you?" he murmured. His eyes never left the shifting shadows. "They're watching. They are waiting, but we decide what comes next. Always. You, me, together." Ashlyn's breath caught, half from the intensity of the prophecy, half from the awareness of his presence, the weight of his devotion pressing warmly against her side. Every nerve in her body seemed to hum, every sense stretched taut across the night. She could feel the pull of destiny in her bones, in the fire coursing beneath her skin, in the unyielding surge of power that had claimed her once and would claim her again, if she allowed it. The moon above flickered, pale and cold, its light cutting through the twisted branches like a blade. The ruins at the edge of the forest seemed to pulse faintly, shadows pooling in the corners like waiting creatures. The earth tremor returned, stronger, and with it came a resonance that only a few could feel, the echo of power ancient and immense, the promise of forces yet unseen, of an alpha yet to awaken. Ashlyn's silver flame responded instinctively, a flare of awareness, a call to attention, a shiver that ran through her spine, through her soul, and through every heartbeat of the forest. Kaelin's gaze swept the horizon, scanning beyond the visible, beyond the immediate, toward threats he could feel but not yet see. "This is not over," he said, almost to himself, almost to her, almost to the world. "Nothing is. Every shadow, every whisper, every hesitation, it's all a prelude to what's coming. And we will rise together, always together." Ashlyn nodded, though words failed her. Her lips parted, but all she could manage was a breathless acknowledgement, a shiver of determination that radiated from her chest outward. Every fiber of her being vibrated with the realization that this night, this whisper, this tremor, this prophecy, was only the beginning. The battlefield behind them was a memory. The path forward was uncertainty incarnate, and yet, impossibly, intoxicatingly, beautiful in its danger. And as they moved forward, the shadows themselves seemed to bend, stretching, twisting, subtly reaching toward them as though testing, gauging, questioning. Eyes followed from every darkness, observing, calculating. Some were hostile, some were curious, some were awed. Every creature, every pack, every spirit in the forest seemed to sense that a force had awoken that night, two hearts intertwined, two flames ignited, and a destiny neither could ignore. The ruins behind them crumbled silently, ash drifting on the wind, as if even the stones acknowledged the shift. Every step they took carried weight, history, and promise. The forest seemed to lean closer, holding its breath, listening. The whisper slithered again, almost imperceptible now, but unmistakable. "She is not the only one. The true alpha hasn't risen yet." The words lingered, shaping the night, bending the shadows, twisting the wind. They were both warning and invitation, a statement and a challenge. Ashlyn's hands flared with silver flame, Kaelin's eyes glinting with molten certainty. The world had shifted. Nothing would be the same again. And in that charged, frozen moment, suspended between fear and possibility, between prophecy and power, the story breathed, alive and electric, waiting for the next heartbeat, the next choice, the next surge of fire. Ashlyn turned slightly, meeting Kaelin's gaze, and for a heartbeat, the universe seemed to narrow to just the two of them, bound by shared trials, shared triumphs, shared power. And in that instant they both understood. The story was far from over. They were merely the beginning of a larger tale, one that would echo across forests, across packs, across generations. If your heart beats for what's next, subscribe now to Florence Werewolf Romance Collections, or enter the comments and lament that you won't witness the rise of the next alpha. Tell us the country you're watching from, and admit if fear held you back from fire. This is your chance. Don't look away, because destiny waits for no one. The wind howled, carrying their combined presence across the darkened landscape. Shadows danced and bent in acknowledgement of the forces stirring, unseen yet undeniable. Every leaf, every stone, every whispering spirit of the night vibrated in anticipation. The tremor beneath their feet continued, faint but insistent, a reminder that the world had shifted, that power had awakened, and that the true Alpha, the one yet to rise, waited just beyond the horizon. Kaelin's fingers brushed hers again, a quiet affirmation that no matter what awaited, they would face it together. Ashlyn's flame flared, bright and fearless, catching on the wind, lighting the edges of the forest in a silver glow. And the whisper returned one final time, a ghostly, slithering promise. She is not the only one. The true Alpha hasn't risen yet. And with that, the night swallowed them, shadows twisting, the earth trembling, a silence that was pregnant with possibility, and the story faded into darkness, leaving every watcher with a question, a shiver, and a heartbeat that thrummed with anticipation for the next rise of fire, power, and destiny.